Imagine transforming your life to achieve not only financial success, but also genuine fulfillment and balance. What if you could unlock more time, reduce stress, and live with an unstoppable drive? Today, we have an extraordinary guest who has coached countless individuals to redefine what it means to succeed, helping them master their time, leadership, and passion. He's a best selling author, a powerhouse in performance coaching, and someone who doesn't just talk about change, he lives it. Get ready to dive into an inspiring journey of purpose and potential with none other than Chad Cooper. Welcome to another episode of our Founders Podcast. I'm your host, Ash, and this is a show where I interview proven founders and industry experts who share their stories, strategies, and insights to help you build, launch, and grow your business. In this episode, we will talk to Shad, a renowned performance coach and best selling author and motivational speaker. I hope you enjoy it. Chad, welcome to the show.
Well, I am excited to be here to help serve and grow your audience's knowledge and be able to apply that knowledge today. So let's dive in.
Definitely. Great. So, do you have a favorite quote, something that inspires or motivates you that you would like to share with our audience?
Well, I'm kind of known as the guy full of quotes. And so trying to narrow that down to one is difficult. But I will do one that people are probably familiar with not too long ago, but in the last James Bond, Jack London was quoted that man is designed to live, not merely exist. I shall not
Mm-hmm.
waste my days. I shall live them fully. So something to that effect. That is a deeply meaningful quote to me of we're here to live, not merely exist.
Indeed, indeed. We need to have a purpose, isn't it, to have this life. I don't know what everybody has a different definition of success, but yeah, I get the point. Great. So tell us about Shad. You know, who is Shad? Why should the listeners listen to him? How come a person got into performance coaching, become a best-selling author, best, and he become a motivational speaker. So many traits, so many roles. Yeah, how did the journey started?
Yeah. So when people ask, "Who am I?" My typical answer to that is rather than a who, is more what am I? And
Hmm.
what I am is love, gentleness, kindness, would be the fruit of the spirit, which are 9 characteristics. And because of that, I got to the age of 35 when we had our son, who was about, I think, getting close to being about 2 years old. And we were concerned about the the character development of our son by people we would say were strangers, people in daycare, etc. We didn't know what their moral compass was, what their values and what their guidance was. And so we made a courageous decision back before this was the popular thing, and that was that my wife was very talented in the corporate world. I was
Hmm.
designed to be more of an entrepreneur. And so I walked away and retired from the corporate world of Microsoft at the age of 35 because financially we could afford to do that. And it was pioneering before really that was the common thing for men to be able to do, and truly supporting the women empowerment of that's what she's talented at. Let her go be the primary breadwinner, and I'll be the one that is a nurturer and helping to shape and guide our son.
Hmm.
So about 3 months into that, I realized I still needed something for myself, and I had the capacity or the ability to do that. And so I did a short stint with Northwestern Mutual, got all of my financial securities and exchange licenses, and they hired me specifically to be a guinea pig to see if I could succeed as a financial advisor. And I blew
Hmm.
that away and performed better than people working 60 hours a week. I was doing about 15. But I realized that the time that it was going to take to create that impact, I could go back to Microsoft and in a year make more money than in probably 5 or 10 years at doing financial advice. So I decided instead, because of my background, my undergraduate degree was psychology and religion. I decided I wanted to go serve people. So I got certified and licensed as a professional life coach. And that allowed the balance between being able to be there as a primary for our son and also being able to impact and serve people outside of our home. So that was really um, the kind of path that it led me to something I've been doing now for 18 or 19 years, coming up on a couple of decades.
Awesome, awesome. And then when, okay, so this is how the story actually started.
Yep.
And when you figured out, like, okay, you wanted to go into the coaching space, um did you looked into I'm sure you must have looked into the market, were there others coaches like you in your demographics, and what was going on at that time, and what did you see from your research that encouraged you to move ahead with this idea?
Well, there are a couple of people that I always wanted to work with. One was Bill Gates, and I was able to do that. Another was Tony Robbins. And when I was 19 years old, I picked up Personal Power before it was even Personal Power 2. And at 19 years old, it really served me deeply and profoundly. And so I said, yeah, I'd always love to work or be able to get to know who Tony was. And so part of that was the inspiration of what he was doing to serve people. And then that really seemed to align to, I thought I did client centered therapy and have a degree in psychology. So I quickly realized I got enough problems of my own, Ash. I don't want to deal with everybody else's for the rest of my life. And so
Hmm.
in that process, what I decided was coaching was more suitable because in coaching, you're dealing, well, I'll say in therapy, what you're doing is dealing with people who say, I'm the way I am because of something in the past that is preventing them from being able to make mature, responsible decisions in the present. So therapy helps you with moving from your past being an excuse for your present decisions. So it's not an excuse, it's an explanation. When you get to the point where you can say it's an explanation, it's not going to direct my decisions in an emotional way, then you're in a great place for coaching that says, I'm going from these explanations to where I want to go in the future. And that just
Hmm.
spoke to me far more deeply. It was also something that I could build my practice to the size and scale it to what was appropriate for the time capacity that I could offer it. So it was ideally suited. And then along the way, Tony actually, his organization reached out and I ended up partnering up with Tony for a number of years and being the secretly being the number one coach behind the scenes for his company, helping with celebrities and professional athletes and those things. So it was very complimentary to my family's lifestyle and need at the time.
Perfect. And if we want to pick like top three traits, what kind of coaching you do with your mentees or your students? What are the top three traits you coach them about?
So in coaching and professional life coaching, I do more of the executive side of that. And there's four tenets to coaching. There's the
Hmm.
physical, the logical, the emotional, and the spiritual. And what you'll often see in action oriented coaching or in the executive coaching is the physical, logical, and emotional. But what I found was the vast majority, 80% to 90% of these clients were struggling in these three areas because they were neglecting the, and the spiritual is more of like a beet on a salad. You ever put a beet on a salad, it bleeds throughout the whole salad and you can't get it out. Well, the spiritual side is that respect in our lives to those four pillars. And probably 95% of coaches will do physical, logical, and emotional. And they avoid the spiritual like the plague, right? At all costs. And then you have another 5% that are all spiritual, but are often the negative connotation of their woo woo and they reject the material. And so what I found was, to be a master coach, you actually had to embrace all four. In that, while
Mhm.
business people might come to me, or professional athlete in a title event, World Series, or Super Bowl, those kind of things, the piece that was missing is, they came to me for the material, or I want to, I've built my empire, Ash, but I don't want to have to consume that in order to preserve my marriage or preserve my physical health.
Mhm.
And the gap that I fill is to say it can be a yes and, not an either or, right? Life is not either or, your health or your finances. And what I
Mhm.
do is bring all four of those tenets to say, when we acknowledge the spiritual and lead from that, then we can have the physical, logical, and emotion. And we're integrated, we're aligned and congruent. And there's very few coaches that understand or coach from that space.
Got it. Got it. So, Shad, in your book, time isn't the problem. You challenge conventional ideas about the time management. Could you share some of the most surprising insights you might have came across while writing the book or before writing the book, and then show some light on it for our listeners?
Sure. So the book was really a selfish ambition. When I got to 35 and then I got to 40 years old, I got to a point where I went, okay, at 19 years old, I designed what I wanted my life to look like for the next 20 to 30 years. I got there
Hmm.
about 5 years ahead of schedule. And I went, there's got to be something more. Tell me this isn't all that there is, right? We know that cliche of celebrities who have fame and fortune only get to the top and find it's very lonely and ask, tell me that there's got to be something more. And that's the spiritual piece that's calling to us. And so, for a selfish perspective, I said, I need to be able to reverse engineer what allowed me to thrive and create what I would say is a legendary life for 20 years.
Hmm.
I was probably 10 to 20 years ahead of the curve. And so I'm not sure what just happened there. Okay, now we're back. So that was not just a personal ambition; it was a selfish ambition that I said I can leave this template for my son should he decide he wants it. But it also was a look, I can go and serve other people. And so once I was able to reverse engineer that, that then turned into what is now today a book and a program course. And so what I found in that is that we're all given 168 hours a week, no more, no less. You,
Hmm.
me, Bill Gates, Oprah Winfrey, Elon Musk, whether you like them or hate those people, they can't buy another hour of time, no matter how much money we have. It is
Yeah.
truly the equalizer. Doesn't matter what your gender is, your religion, your race, your economic background, your geography, everyone is given 168 hours. The question is, how can somebody like Elon Musk run seven companies simultaneously while others of us, struggle holding down a part-time job? And so what I found is how we use that time is what separates the men from the boys and the women from the girls. And so I looked
Hmm.
at working with high performance athletes, people doing title fights that would win again and again. Looking at Olympians, I worked with gold and silver medalists that were multi gold medalists. I worked with billionaires and I looked at the hacks and the tricks that they used in order to succeed, and that I had also tuned into, and that I started getting from my time in the Marine Corps, as an example. And I began to implement and understand it's that ability to be able to be persistent and consistent that allows us to overall win. And so we know the story of the turtle and the hare, but people really often don't appreciate and understand why the turtle ends up winning and what was the behavior that the turtle used that ultimately beat the hare. And so I studied that and put that together in the book so that you can win.
Hmm. Got it. And would you be able to give some tips or maybe more insights on this fact that you figured out, like obviously we all have 168 hours every week, and it all depends upon how we use our time, and then the productivity aligned to it directly or indirectly, whichever way we want to pursue it. But what makes these high performance athletes, billionaires, different than a general or a typical you know person? What's the different traits
Sure.
you've picked up?
Sure. So if we look at an Olympian as an example, most Olympians max out of their sport in their 20s, right? It's an exception for somebody to go beyond that in most scenarios. So they've had to learn how to compress time. So what are some of the behaviors and characteristics that they used? Well, what I found was a couple of things. One is that they are really good, and Elon Musk is an excellent example as well. Bill Gates was an excellent example. Is they're really good at being able to remove distractions and not allow distractions to grab their attention, because
Mm-hmm.
what they understand underneath those distractions, the distractions aren't actually the goal. So social media, binge watching streaming series, alcohol addiction, pornography, food, overconsumption, on and on we can go. They understand surgical precision, get what you need and get out, right? So they're in and they're out. None of those are bad in and of themselves. It's that when we continue to use those distractions to numb ourselves, that leads to addictions. So an addiction is anything that you do repeatedly to feel good, but ultimately has negative consequences. So when we look at Olympians, when we look at performers like an Elon Musk, they're really good at being able to understand what's the outcome. So an Olympian knows it's a finite amount of time. They know the outcome that they have to achieve and by the time that they need to achieve it. J.K. Rowling is a great example of she wrote Harry Potter with the end first and then worked it backwards. So when we look at what those high performers do, they know what's the finish line and then they do the plan backwards. That way they know when they need to refuel, where they hit milestones to, change out their tires and get new treads. They know where to take the pit stops, and they also know where the traps and the things that are there to get them addicted are sitting, and they avoid those. The second thing that they do is Tony Robbins in front of I don't know, it was about like 160 coaches said, Chad, you have the number one stats, yet you work less than any coach that I've ever had. I mean, granted, you're part time, but how do you have the highest retention of clients? My clients work with me on average 11 to 13 years straight, right? That shows that I'm delivering value. So how do you have these highest, customer satisfaction, et cetera, yet you have all this time that you take off? And I said, you're ambushing me. I don't think you really want me to answer that in front of everybody. And he's like, no, I want to hear it. So I said, okay, I schedule all my priorities in my personal life first. My personal priorities go first on my calendar, but that's not what you're taught in school. It's not what you're taught in business. What you're taught is that you put all your other sacrifices, everything that isn't you, first. And when and if there's any spare time, then you might be able to take part of your vacation. Then you might be able to take some time for yourself. And what I
Mm.
learned was that being, taking care of yourself is actually not selfish. It's being responsible. Because if I'm not good, how am I supposed to help anybody else? And
Exactly.
so I put, my family on the calendar first. Every morning, I have what I call my setting the stage. So every morning, I spend about 45 minutes of meditation and prayer and devotion and setting my stage before the stage curtains go up so that I can put on a Tony winning performance. But how many of us, Ash, when we get up, the first thing we do is we reach over and we grab our phone and we just
Yeah.
start going into that addiction, right? Because it's a bad habit. So they're really good at knowing what the outcome is, working backwards, and they avoid the distractions, and that's how winning is done. So if you
Mm.
put those priorities first, here's what the result is. He's like, then how do you get all your client stuff done? Well, if I have 6 hours worth of work to do and I only have 2 hours to do it in, I'm going to cut out all the fluff. I'm going to figure out how to get to that goal by cutting out the things that are not urgent and important. And I'm going to get it done in 4 hours. But the opposite holds true as well. If I have 4 hours of work to do and I have 6 hours to do it in, I'm going to figure out how to throw away 2 hours and waste that time. Okay? There's a principle that talks about that. It's Peter's principle, if I'm not mistaken. So when we do that, we become very effective at our time. And what we're doing is actually getting what we expect rather than accepting what we get. And so you lead with conversations that are very different. Okay. If you listen to these people, instead of saying, well, Ash, when would you like to meet? And they accept whatever they get. When you only have a certain amount of time, you lead with active questions. Okay, Ash, I have Wednesday at 2 or Thursday at 1 or next Thursday at 4 o'clock. Which works best for you? They're leading and saying, here's the standard. Are you able to meet it? Versus lowering standards.
Yeah, and that I couldn't agree more with you on this one because initially when I started, hosting my podcast, I used to ask my guest, okay, what time works for you? And then we put up a calendar on top, and then the guests decide whenever they want to come. But actually, it's me who has decided what time works for me better. So it works really, really good.
That's right. So we learn from others that succeed when we hang around others that are successful. And one of those is that they set a standard and they're competing against themselves, not competing against the low standards of society. So when we know our standard, when we know our outcome, we will tend to rise to that if we can be persistent and consistent.
Got it. Got it. One thing which I found really interesting when you were explaining the traits which this super high performance individual has different than typical people is they understand the end and then they reverse engineer it. Would you be able to share a compelling story which showcases this phenomena? Did you come across any of them?
Yeah, think about in sports, for example. If you want to run, and I say, Ash, go run. The first question you're going to ask is how far? Well, if I know the distance, let's say I decide I want to run a marathon for whatever reason. Okay?
Yeah.
Now I know the outcome. It's
Mhm.
26.2 miles, okay, or 40K run.
Mhm.
Now I have to then I can do the research. Okay, where and when is the next marathon? Well, based on the time of year, we're going to miss the window for the fall. So now I know I have to look at the spring when they tend to run marathons in the spring and fall. So I can then say, let me do my training plan backwards. So if it's not until the spring, I have plenty of time and I may look at it and say, oh, I don't need to start doing my training until February with 3 miles. Then week 2, I might go 5 miles. Week 3, I might so I can create a training plan forward so that I know that I'm perfectly prepared to succeed and complete that race when the starting gun goes off because I know the date and the time and the location that's going to happen. So we see that in nature. We see that in all kinds of sports. We see that in race car driving, right? But here's the thing that people don't realize. Is we do that analogy in Formula One racing. You can have the world's best race car. You can have the world's most skilled racer, and you can have the world's best pit crew. But you will never win a race without doing one very important thing, and that is taking a pit stop. You have to take a pit stop, but they don't do it arbitrarily. Professional athletes, financial titans understand it is a strategic calculation to know when to tactically make that moment happen. They know what the tread wear is on the tire. They know what the temperatures are on the track. They know the weather conditions. They know the fuel mileage. They know everything about it. So they know exactly when to take that break. But what do we see in our society? Oh, you just keep going until the wheels fall off and you slam into the wall, as if that's some badge of honor of success. That's not. That's failing. Why go through the pain? Why lose the race? So the same thing in training for a sport, a marathon, is where do you have your pit stops? You don't just keep on increasing the mileage training for a marathon. You're going to have recovery weeks. You're going to have kind of pulling back a little so that you can go further forward. So we have these examples throughout all kinds of different areas of our life. But one of those responsibilities is when we strategically and tactically come into that pit stop, so that we don't get laughed by the competition because we came in too early. We don't slam into the wall because we waited too late. And by doing that, we can actually win the race of life.
Interesting. And y- I understand that, consistency is very important. And then you explained it very well that understanding the end goal, you can reverse engineer it and then create a structure towards your, activities, tasks, or preparation, whatever you want to do to achieve that goal. But a lot of people give up very, very quickly. Like, you see gyms are full 1st January till 30th January. You go to the gym any time of the day, early morning, 5 7 p.m. It's always full. But
Yep.
slowly, slowly, when you get into May, June, July, exactly those times get very fewer people. And these are the people who've been going to the gym with you for the last 1 year. So there are very few people in the gym you will see who, like you saw when the January, triggered.
Yeah.
How do you, in your experience, what's the first step someone should take in order to identify their true passion, first of all, and then align it with their goals?
Yeah. So Calvin Coolidge, a former United States president, said persistence is omnipotent. And he said to an extent is knowledge is common, and we have a bunch of knowledgeable derelicts in the world, right? Um, talent is commonplace. Talent alone is going to get you squat. I work with athletes that have all the talent in the world. To get to the
Mm,
professional level, every one of them has talent. To stay there and stand out requires a lot more. And so one of those is the understanding of persistence and consistency. So what is it to go to the gym and crank out a 4-hour workout one time? Well, you're going to be incredibly sore. You're not going to get the results if you do it once a month because there's no consistency and you're not persisting with it. And so you're going to go
mm,
back once a month, and every time you're going to get sore, you're going to give up. And so what we have to understand in that equation when we look at high performing people is that they have in the beginning at some point in life, this was the size of their comfort zone. Okay. What I learned in the Marines was to learn to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And
mm,
so what happens is New Year's resolutions, they go out and here's their comfort zone, Ash. And then they go out and they go, oh, okay, I'm going to go out and do all this impact and do all this stuff. Well, it's too much growth. It's too much change at one point. And so then they infarcate in like a rubber band that you're trying to snap at somebody, it backfires and hurts yourself. And so the goal is to learn to get comfortable being uncomfortable is a little bit of growth, a little bit of discomfort, a little bit of discomfort, a little bit of discomfort. And pretty soon your comfort zone gets larger and stays at that capacity. And so it's
mm,
about the ability to be consistent in our habits because you're probably consistent in your bad habits. So can you be consistent in building positive and affirming habits? And when you do that, then your comfort zone expands and you're able to handle the adversity and be able to stay determined to be persistent until you get to the finish line. This is one of the challenges that we have in our society today is the industrial age brought about prosperity and longevity in our health and leisure and luxury, but it also brought about a lack of purposeful existence. It brought about gluttony. It brought about comfort, and it made us fat and lazy. And so comfort's a great place to visit, but you don't want to live there. If you want to
yeah.
succeed, you have to understand a principle that all professional athletes, Olympians, billionaires, financial titans understand, right? And that we understand from the military service. And that is this pain is one of the primary ingredients for success. If we look at that in a recipe, let's say your favorite cookie, you can make pain the ratio of salt. not the sugar or the flour. You need a little bit, right? But without it, it doesn't turn out. So pain is part of the process of growing our comfort zone. And you have to accept it's going to come along for a ride. Suffering are the stories about the pain, and we can choose to leave the story on the sideline. Just don't subscribe to the stories about the pain. It's our stories about the pain that cause us to give up. So when we start doing something that's uncomfortable, we should be grateful and say, great, it's telling me something is happening, something's changing, right? And in that process, if we stay with that, then we can actually understand that pain is a megaphone to progress.
Sure. Um, I think I heard a phone ringing. I'm. Is that not? It's
That's,
not
yeah,
yours. Yeah. Okay.
no.
Great stuff. So what I did is I thought that the cookie analogy you gave, the cookie itself has some chocolate nuggets in it, and then I demonstrated in my head these chocolate nuggets as pain points, but it is sweet, and then the overall cookie is your uncomfortable zone. So maybe there are small portions of comfort in your whole cookie. Is that something I'm on the right lines, or I'm just totally distracted here?
Well, what it is understanding what cookie you decide to bake. You've got to look at what are the ingredients to that turning out really well. So part of that is pain is going to be one of those ingredients if you want to succeed. Okay, we just
Hmm.
have to accept that that's part of the process. We can leave the suffering out of the equation because that's the bitterness that causes us to quit. But the other parts in that is that we then also have to understand what's the outcome. Am I making a cookie? Am I making a cake? Am I making a pie? Right? Is what is it that I'm actually going to make? And then what is the order of ingredients? So we have to know the ratio. We have to know, look, you could do all the ingredients into a batter to bake a cake. And you can put it in the oven, but if you forgot to do the eggs, you can't just crack a couple of eggs and smother it over the top and think it's going to turn out, right? We have to have that as part of the mixture, and it has to be in the right order.
The
And
right
so that's
order.
one of the understandings is people understand in order to win, what's the steps in order to succeed. There's really been very little that's ever truly been invented. Unless you're Thomas Edison inventing electricity, right? Which Benjamin Franklin, learned, we got electrocuted from a kite, kind of, the stories there. Most of us are just leveraging somebody else's knowledge. And so we can just simply accept that, look, um, I don't have to be the inventor of the wheel to benefit from it. I don't have to be the composer of a piece of classical music to be able to conduct the symphony and produce beautiful music. But I do need to know the sequence in which that needs to unfold. I do need to stay persistent and consistent in practicing the instrument in order for that to come out in high quality.
Indeed, indeed. And that's what, you know, blows my mind, that once you are in your control, once you understand what you want to do, and then you prepare for it from the there is something called first principle, which Elon Musk always look for whenever he's either starting a new company or creating spaceships, things like that. That is something always motivated me. But there is another part of it, like you talk about turning setbacks into growth opportunities, right? In your book, in your talks, what are the memorable examples where a setback became a pivotal uh, place for someone whom you have coached in under your wings?
A setback
Yeah.
reminds me of Jerry Seinfeld, the great philosopher. Now, he was a phenomenal comedian, right? We know from his show Seinfeld. And Jerry said something very, very philosophical, very profound. He says, "You don't need to know anything. Anything you need to know, you'll learn to know at the time that you need to know it. So if you stub your foot on the edge of a bedpost and it hurts, you needed to know that. So if we go through the principle of nothing is wrong, nothing is broken, anything that happens that you might label as adverse, then we can simply accept the fact of, oh, I needed to know that. Maybe it was a growing point. So often when we face adversity or difficulty and things don't turn out, we go, oh, that happened to us. Well, did it ever occur? Maybe that happened for us. And so we often can look at that as, well, I'm a victim. Well, winners and high performers understand you can't be a victor and a victim simultaneously. And so they have to learn which one are they going to subscribe to, which one are they going to feed. And in the process of that, what they can really make that decision, once they decide to be victorious, we have to drop the story of victim. And so I had I love to use I'll give you a couple examples. Is one, I had a professional baseball player in the World Series, and he was not performing very well. Every time he would get on the pitching mound, he just was in a slump. Mechanically, he was nothing I could teach him, and they'd try to work with them, and so it came to me, and ultimately the concern was that he was concerned that his spouse was cheating on him, and she was, and so he had to make a decision. Do you go for renewing the contract and focusing on your career? And it was probably the second to last contract he was going to get before he was too old to compete. Or do you preserve the marriage? Now, when we have people that love us, they're going to tell us what they think is best for us versus our own intuitive what we should do. And the hard part is a lot of people might judge the person, but he chose the contract and they went on to win the World Series, right? And a lot of people might judge that, but that's what was coming from his truth, in that adversity was a muscle that he needed to grow in order to be able to serve him down the road. Now, I also had another client that was up for a title fight in boxing. And I said, who do you think's more hungry? The opponent who's never had the title, or you trying to hold on and retain the title? He's like, well, me. I said, that's not true. He's like, oh yeah, it's true. I said, okay, great. At what point, what round will you fought and exerted enough effort that you'll use the excuse and say, oh, this is the round where I can say, I fought hard enough. And that's really understanding, Ash, that the principle of 99% is the same as 1%. You don't get to the finish line. You don't get the goal. You don't get the title. It's how much did you expend? Who cares? You didn't get to 100%. So 99% is the same as 1%. And I could tell that the 100% wasn't there. I said, great. If you're so convinced, I'm going to let you know that I kidnapped your children, and I bet every penny I have that you will win. And if you don't, then I've given an order to kill your children. Now, it's a horrific example. You better have deep rapport with that person to be able to go there. And I did. The look on his face, the anger, and I said, that's the 100%. Anything it takes to save your children's life, that's what it's going to require. And he got over he understood the point of there was still another level of drive, a level of burn the boats, burn the bridges. There's no other path but forward. That in that adversity, he was able to find his strength, right? Pain is God's megaphone to say, pay attention. And what actually happened in that fight is that he actually he twisted his ankle, and the pain was severe, but he knew that he had to overcome that distraction of pain in order to beat his opponent. And he did. So it's an example of pain can be a powerful example, but it is the adversity that when the mind tells us, ow, that hurts, the body is capable of 20 times more. And I learned that lesson first when I was in the military of this sucks. This is painful. I don't want to keep going. And the mind tells you to quit, but the body is capable of continuing to go far beyond what we ever thought possible. And we see that as examples of Holocaust survivors during World War II, just as one example. There's examples again and again and again of our ability to persevere, but our brain is going to tell us stay comfortable. Well, comfort is the neighbor to mediocrity, and mediocrity is the neighbor to poverty. So you have to
Mhm.
decide whether you're going to get uncomfortable if you want to win.
Got it. Got it. Perfect. I mean, this is really really eye opening for me also, because if you understand these basic concepts of how you want to live your life, it gets easier for you to make decisions which way you want to go, isn't it?
With clarity, yes. With clarity comes simplicity. And with clarity in experience comes the maturity to understand that difficult roads lead to beautiful destinations.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
If you want
Couldn't
to, if you want a miserable life, have a comfortable life. If you want to
agree.
have an impactful life and a meaningful life, get uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, thanks, Chad, and I'm enjoying this conversation a lot, but just concern of time. I do this with all of my guests on my show, where I try to showcase what we have learned today. So just want to summarize very quickly what we have learned, and you can tell me if I have, you know, understood something wrong, and we can obviously change it. So you started your journey early, then a turning point came into your life when you were 35-ish year old, when you had your first baby, I guess, and then you decided to stay home and then focus on your family, because you had this, arrangement with your partner. Uh, After that, you chose to go into the coaching, where you mentioned that there are only four verticals which usually coaches teach about: physical, logical, emotional, and spiritual. But most of the coaches just limit themselves to the first three, which is physical, logical, and emotional. But spiritual is almost equally important as the top three, isn't it? So that was
It's the
something very, yeah,
yep.
so that was something very very important. One of the things which I really really like, when you mentioned that knowledge is also common and talent is also common, what makes it different is, consistency and perseverance, which you mentioned in the example. um, Maybe I might have got it wrong, but one of the things you mentioned is learn to be comfortable when you are in your uncomfortable zone. Is that
Learn to get
close?
learn to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
With being uncomfortable, yeah, that was one of the things which I've learned. And I think what I did is I tried to demonstrate it with my cookie, where my cookie is my uncomfortable zone, but then there is small chunks of chocolates which gives me pain, which is the sweet. I mean, right now I'm trying to lose weight, that's why I try to put this analogy together. But ultimately, what makes high performance individual different than general public is they remove distraction from their everyday life, and in order to achieve their goal, they try to prioritize, and I think you are spot on prioritizing your family as first, and then going to the second and third priority. And then one of the things which I love myself a lot, which is reverse engineering your goals, so that you can understand what you have to put in order to get to the point. Is there anything else you think which we might have missed here, or you would like to add?
The only thing I would add into that, Ash, is our calendars are outcome management. And the thing that I see in the Western world, so I'm part of a indigenous tribe in New Zealand that are called the Waitaha. And they said that the thing that they notice about the Western world is they have a bunch of spiritual gurus and teachers going around doing spirituality, and they have no
Mhm.
idea that it's actually a beingness. And so I would ask people to look at, as you look at all of this, is there's the doingness underneath all of this. But the key to it in the spiritual is asking ourselves, who are we deciding to be in the midst of whatever we choose to do? And so the spiritual is about our beingness. And that goes really back to
Mm,
the very beginning when you asked for me to share who am I? It's not a who. Our who is our ego and our identity. But what is much
mm,
more deep than that, the spiritual, is what am I? The what I
mm,
am is who do I decide to be regardless of what I'm doing. And so that may be the decision. The fruit of the spirit, for example, is kindness, gentleness, love, patience, self-discipline, faithfulness, etc. Is, do I choose to be all nine of those? Because it's singular. It's not fruits of the spirit, it's
Mhm.
fruit of the spirit. Is, do I choose to be those characteristics, all nine of them, regardless of whether my external environment or people are polite or rude? Is, it's a choice. Do I choose to be kind even when people don't deserve it? So that's really the spiritual is our guiding force. That is the part that I set my stage every day. And that begins with, may peace begin with me, and may I begin with peace. Then we can be a master of our emotions. Then we can
Mm.
be a master of our logic. Then we can be a master of our physical.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, quite deep, deep wave in my brain right now. So you have given me quite a lot of food for thought for this weekend, Shad. Thanks for that.
Excellent.
Moving towards the last part of our episode, where we are gonna get into a lightning round. I've got six quick fire questions for you. If you could answer them for me, and that should summarize our episode. Is that okay with you?
We're going to see.
Yeah. Okay. Great stuff. Great stuff.
I'm willing to play. We'll see how powerful it is or how embarrassing it is. So let's try.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Okay. Great. Number one, what's the top three strategies to discipline yourself in 2024 in order to achieve your goals?
The first I would say is get rid of the distractions. The election is a distraction. Go out and vote. You know, we used to vote was not part of our identity. It was simply a process that we went about. Look, regardless of whoever gets in office, that's going to have a ripple effect around the world still today. The United States does carry a lot of weight still. But the reality is it's going to have very little impact on your backyard, in your local community, in your direct home. You get to choose what you're going to do. And so what I would say is remove the distractions and focus on the outcomes. The second thing I would say in that is what high performers understand, just keep chipping away. So even if it's 5 minutes, you know, one of the things that you're talking about New Year's resolutions, start now. Think about if you're going to go run around the track and you're at full speed as you come to the starting line and the gun goes off and everybody else is still in the starting blocks, you come around at full speed, you're going to win the race. So if you want to stick with your New Year resolutions, start now. Get to full speed and build the habits in incremental amounts. So let's say you want to meditate, Ash. Great. Start with 5 minutes, not 30. Start small and work your way up. That's how we grow our comfort zone. And then third, I would say is all great leaders. It's probably one of the most uncommon things. First is people don't realize great leaders have one characteristic called courage. The other that you almost never hear is don't forget to laugh.
Mm.
Laughter is what carries us through the pain in the difficult moments. Laughter is what allows us to stay the course, persistence, and consistency. So laugh along the journey. It's not just about the finish line. It's about enjoying the journey along the way. And laughter is part of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree. Great. What book would you recommend to our audience and why?
Well, I'll tell you what, my favorite author is Hemingway. And I would say The Sun Also Rises is actually one of my favorites. I'm a romantic at heart, and a lot of people would be recommending some business book or some deep philosophy. Is there's deep meaning, there's all kinds of complexity and simplicity simultaneously interwoven into Hemingway's writing, and it's a timeless book of just learning and pleasure together. So it's probably my all-time favorite book.
Awesome. What's one attribute or characteristic in your mind of a successful founder?
Laughter. Um, Successful founders know when to laugh at themselves, and they know when to laugh at the world and what that ratio needs to be. And if laughter is something that doesn't resonate with you, then courage. Okay, courage to do the difficult things, courage to actually get uncomfortable.
Got it. What's your favorite personal productivity tool or habit?
Favorite person, activity, tool or habit? I would say I didn't value this when I was younger to a certain degree, but as we get older, we also see a lot of people value that serenity, that time where I can just um, be silent and connect with God, where I can listen for His voice. So if we think about before we had caller ID on phones, if somebody called you and you had no idea who was there, the way you would recognize them if they didn't say who it was is by the sound of their voice. So if you want to have a deeply, impactful relationship with your spirit, you have to have a relationship to be able to recognize its voice. And we only do that typically when we have space to listen.
Definitely, definitely. What's a new or a crazy business idea you would like to pursue if you had time?
I'd love to see us lead in areas that have been neglected. So I'd love to see us innovate in all new kinds of ways around using AI. I'd love to see us really innovate in terms of medical. Quantum science, literally the stuff of Star Trek, is now available, but is being kept out of certain areas. And I'd love to see us dig into, it now takes us longer to get to and from work than it did in the 50s because of congestion and because our systems aren't properly designed. It's time for us to actually innovate and revamp a lot of the systems that have been there for a long time. There's no reason why we can't innovate in many of these areas. Environmental is lacking the true science aspect, and we have an opportunity to expand in profound ways, but we've really kind of limited that to computer science. And it's time to be able to leverage that into our infrastructure, into our economies, into our agriculture. There's no reason why people should be without food today. We have the ability to do it.
Yeah, yeah. And last but not least, what's an interesting or fun fact about you that most people don't know?
That I've actually stood up 3 foundations, and in that process, back to what are the common characteristics of great leaders, is you'll find statistically they contribute beyond themselves, right? And so one of the things that I do is I have a foundation that serves around the world, and I overproduce in order to be able to give what's extra to others. And that's part of the formula for success. So that's part of getting uncomfortable. I go to parts of the world, developing parts of the world that are very uncomfortable, so that I actually can realize how blessed and how much gratitude I need to give for the things that I have. It's when we compare to and we get comfortable that we start to get entitled. So why do I go serve? Selfishly, it allows me to have gratitude and recognize how blessed I am.
Yeah, yeah, totally agree. Shad, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your story, unpacking years of your building business and some of the ups and downs. If people want to check out your profile or they want to get in touch, what's the best way to do it?
It's easy. I keep it real simple for people. Just go to my website, chadecooper.com. See it on the screen there, chadecooper.com. You'll find a free book. You'll find a paid book. You'll find all kinds of, and for the first time in, I think, 18 years, I'm actually opening to probably about 6 more slots per client. So being an empty nester now for the last couple of years, I found I want to go out and create more impact. So that is available if people are looking.
Awesome. Shad, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your inspiring journey and the impactful work you're doing. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on Founders Podcast.
Likewise. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you all for tuning into this episode of Founders Podcast. I hope you found our conversation with Shad insightful and inspiring. Please go to shadecooper.com in order to get free access to his ebooks, or if you want to get hands on some of the other books. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to our podcast and stay updated on our future interviews with proven founders and industry experts. Stay inspired, stay motivated, and keep building.